So, welcome everyone to today's webinar, Ensuring Your Environment is Compliant with iTunes Clarity. This webinar is brought to you by Remo 3. My name is Misty Scott, and I am pleased to be your moderator today. I am super excited to introduce our speakers today. So, if you want to flip on to that next slide there. Samit is our Chief Technical Officer and co-founder. He is also a certified enterprise app nerd with over 20 years of experience in app management at places like Install Shield, App DNA, and now Remo 3. Samit is also a proud Chicagoan. Despite the weather, he does stay for his amazing family, paddle boards, and golf courses. Thankfully, he loves a lot of tech and travel that allows him to escape that cold weather occasionally. All right, so Josh Travers is our VP of Customer Solution. He drives strategic client partnerships and delivers tailored endpoint optimization plans and ensures customer success through innovative software support. Josh is also a lover of all things sports, and he secretly has a awesome green thumb. A lot of people don't know that about him, but now y'all do. All right, so with that, I am gonna turn it on over to you guys.
Thank you, Misty.
Take it
And
away.
I gotta say, Josh, your face is a lot bigger than my face on this, and it might be a direct proportion to brain size. But the good news is you guys are all in line to see a great demonstration led by Josh, and only have to deal with me for one slide. But today's focus is really around compliance, and compliance in a modern world, it's a word that covers a matter of all sins, right? And when you start thinking about compliance as it pertains to endpoint management, this is the first time in my career that we've seen such a massive shift as far as people moving away from the same legacy processes that have existed for years and years, meaning from the Microsoft SMS acquisition to the current state of SCCM. And the first piece on this journey towards modern compliance really is around getting to modern in the first place. And it really is dictated by a couple of things, in my opinion, here. As you start thinking about adoption in general, adoption is a different word and term than migration to me, because you're starting with Intune, and Intune is meant to be a cloud-first, cloud-native, modern management plane with modern provisioning practices, modern technology. But a lot of us are kind of stuck, and a lot of our customers and partners are also stuck in the legacy world with legacy tooling. And the best way to kind of build that bridge right now, as people start their journey to cloud curious, cloud first, or even cloud native, is through visibility. It's through understanding what is the current state of play. And luckily for us, things like Config Manager has so much power as it comes to granularity, as in terms of controls. And people have rightfully built processes around these granular controls and capabilities for years. And they've taken their business logic, they've ensured that they have the right security posture, they've built their SLAs, they've built their application delivery strategy, their OS image management strategy around this technology stack. But as we all know, there is a big shift towards modern, and that shift towards modern is not only from a secure perspective, and also for people to take advantage of technologies that Microsoft is unleashing around Copilot and AI, which have to really, to truly embrace the power of those solutions, you have to be in a modern state, or at least a hybrid managed state. And as we start thinking about what that journey looks like, historically, it's been focused on not just an OS migration, but really it's been focused on leveraging people with skill sets that understand distribution points, that understand policy management, that understand WSUS, how it's going to translate to WFB, and some of these other things that are happening to help people start embracing that modern. And for us, when we started having these conversations back in 2019, when people were starting to adopt AVD or WVD at that time at scale, and starting to look at how they can get to Intune, it was really very clear that the problem was not just necessarily about getting application workloads into Intune. It was more about making sure that they can keep up with those operations once they've actually migrated to Intune. And our goal was to make that journey initially as simple as possible by leveraging automation and taking advantage of all that business logic that you put and processes that you've built around Config Manager or whatever RMM you might be using to start making that migration to modern. And for us, being able to take automation to that next step and build our IP in, it gives us a unique position to be able to come in and give you a true visible view into your current state. Which are your applications that are being migrated? Which are your most business critical applications? How many different versions are there out there? Which ones need to be managed? Which ones need to move to Windows 11? Which are good candidates for Windows 365? Should I be wrapping them as MSIX, or is this something that can work as an app volumes package? Is this something that I just need to physically install as a Intune Win wrapped package? And our goal initially was to help you understand by giving you that level of visibility and bringing automation to your current processes to help you map that safe journey into a modern world. And from a compliance standpoint, that's really step one. Do I have the right assets in my modern environment so that I can truly embrace some of the stuff that we're looking at, taking advantage of coming down the pipe from Microsoft? And this is one of my favorite lines that Josh kind of throws out there. Well, thank you for getting me to Intune, but now what? Right? My processes aren't fit for purpose. I can't have a 45-day SLA to send out a cumulative update. I don't have the granularity that I need. And, I just don't have the information to give me that level of confidence to say, I can transition my workflows and translate those workflows to adopt a much more modern sequence, right, of events that will allow me to keep up with that updated and expedited pace of change. And the way that I kind of look at that was actually, we don't know anything about Intune when we started this conversation, when we started this journey. So we had the opportunity to work very closely with the Intune engineering team, as well as the Intune MVP community. And one of the biggest things that were uncovered is, well, you can't just move a box from your old garage to your new garage. You can't just wrap the application. You have to give me some insights on the impact analysis of what that application will do when I deliver it via Intune to my newly managed environments, to my newly provisioned environments as I move away from MDT, as I move away from traditional custom OS and gold image management. And the first thing that we really focused on based on that feedback was unifying all of the data from our automations as it pertains to application delivery and application management and tie it back into the Intune deployment workflows. And for us, that really encompassed two things. One, a marriage of data to answer the question of, now that I've got it in Intune, is it safe to deploy via Intune? And number two, it was really around, okay, now can you make that deployment inside of Intune easier? Where we've introduced a Chromium plugin that allows you to do bulk actions, bulk assignments to help you with that journey and that bridge as you translate to modern processes of application assignments, phase deployments, deployment rings, and being able to do it with a series of automations and workflows that you define so that you really can, A, keep up with that pace of change, B, realize some of those cost savings that are associated with a lot of the mundane tasks like application assignments, like bulk delete, like being able to create those phase deployment templates that you're going to reuse over and over for your deployment rings. But also, if you're bringing automation into that overall table and it's done in an informed manner with that marriage of data, you can have the new version of that application straight from the vendor, completely validated, completely packaged the day that it's released. So that it's sitting in Intune, ready for you to make that decision that on day zero, I'm ready to send to deployment ring 0, deployment ring 1, or even to GA if you feel confident enough that the vendor is a good vendor, right? So being able to not only keep up with change, but also translate those processes so that it's easier to do the deployment with an informed position and posture of mirroring your application data with your deployment data puts you in that position that you can have success on day two, as opposed to getting everything into Intune and then trying to muddle your way through. And that's a really important piece, because as you start thinking about compliance from an SLA perspective, from a change deployment perspective, from a ticketing perspective, we want to make sure that not only are we able to audit and create the right absolute workflows for you, but we also want to be able to take all this great data that we've talked about from the Microsoft Graph Beta API, 2,500 calls, whatever the limit might be. People have the ability, and people have been taking the time to actually build out Power BI dashboards or Tableau dashboards and trying to pull that data, but it becomes stale quite quickly, and there's a massive amount of effort associated with it. So not only are you not getting near real-time reporting, what you're getting is fractured data, fragmented data. You now have your device data or you have your OS data, but what you don't have is a roll-up. And our goal is ultimately to be able to not only expose that data to you, but expose it in a meaningful way so that you can start thinking about it in the context of the entirety of the workspace. Because to me, the workspace is a living, breathing organism. And those of you that know me know that I use that DNA concept all the time. But this concept of a workspace is the entirety. It's a composition of 4 different components, each of which have 80 to 150 different APIs each, starting with the actual device, which is the foundation of your workspace, along with the Windows OS and the build that you're provisioning based on the user profile, based on the Entra ID, based on your provisioning policies, as well as all of the applications. We're dealing with a very large retailer who has 60 different configurations of Zoom. So not only do they want to make sure that they have Zoom working in each and every one of those configurations, they have to make sure that the Chinese team doesn't get a Singaporean flag on their Zoom instance. And that logic has to be built in as part of these deployment mechanisms. So when you start thinking about that basically compliance sandwich around workspace insights, to steal Josh's term, you're starting with the devices, then you're layering on the operating environment, then you're adding the applications, and then any of the environmental variables and provisioning policies that you've put together using those Intune settings configurations. And seeing each of them individually, there's some value in that, but being able to roll it up into something that you can actually take out and turn into actions that you can say, oh, great, this makes perfect sense to me. I now have the ability to know that Samit's Windows Cloud PC is fit for purpose. He's got these particular applications, but 2 or 3 of them have vulnerabilities. Here's the recommended guidance around how to remediate that, how to leverage automation and build workflows that will give you the insights and give you the outcome that you're looking to achieve. Because this journey is a very daunting one. And without automation, it's a very tedious and expensive one. So as we start looking at compliance, I look at it in those 3 buckets: getting to Intune, then being operationally efficient in Intune, and then optimizing the Intune based on guardrails and thresholds that are right for your enterprise or your organization to be able to start taking actions. If it's 5 critical vulnerabilities in an application that's deployed to 80% of your workforce, great. Set that threshold and we'll let you know if there's a better application or a better resolution that you should be taking advantage of. So the journey is definitely a big part of that overall automation pipeline, but ultimately it's going to be continuously happening as and when you get new versions of applications, as and when you get new versions of feature updates, when you get new cumulative updates and you're using auto patch and hot patch capabilities. What you need to ensure is that your users are not going to be impacted and your application portfolio is going to run the way that it's meant to. And only by tying these 3 tenets together do you have a solution that can really give you the adoption route as well as the operations wherewithal, and then the insights to be able to take action to help you stay optimized in your Intune environment. So it's a big lift when you start thinking about the translation and transition of legacy tooling and processes, but we're trying to do it in one fell swoop. We're not only going to help you translate those services, but we're also going to help you optimize it. And, to really get an understanding of what that workflow looks like and the type of data we're going to expose, specifically around compliance, as we think about that sandwich with the 4 layers of OS to Windows, to the applications, to the actual Intune settings and the user provisioning process, I'll turn it over to Josh to walk you through the actual dashboards in the live demo. All you, Josh.
Great. Thank you, Samit. I just went ahead and shared my screen, so just let me know if you're not able to see that. But in today's solution overview, we're going to be focusing on Remo 3's Intune extensibility solution by ways of reporting and dashboarding analytics. And we will follow and focus on the context of compliance and how we can use this solution to aid, to prepare, and ultimately where we're going to pick up from the journey, as Samit was mentioning, is after we've done that heavy lift, exhausted our effort, our resources, and now we're at a milestone stage within the Intune tenant. So in terms of the solution overview today, we're going to walk through a couple of those key ingredients for that compliance sandwich, but a little bit of navigational information around this solution. So what we've done within the Remo 3 reporting solution that you're seeing is we've really simplified the approach on how you get data outside of your Intune tenant. And for those of you that are familiar, it's all done through the Graph API. Now, that requires a skill set, and you need to know what data to go and pull out. What the solution is also doing is it's simplifying and removing any dependencies for third-party reporting tools. Though the third-party reporting tools are good in their own regard, they have licensing implications. They require skill sets. There's developer implications as well for implementation. So within this, we've combined it all. So we've simplified the Intune graph data retrieval, and we've eliminated any third-party dependencies. And what we've done in our approach is very interesting, because we want our customers that are zero maturity level from Intune to be able to get to a 3 on day one. And it's a pretty tall task to ask, but what we've done in our approach to support that is we've created a series of out-of-the-box dashboards to use on day one. And how we did this is we worked very closely with the Microsoft Intune MVP community, our strategic customers, our strategic partners, and we collected as much data as possible to truly understand what they wanted. And the scale of maturity varies from a 0 all the way to a 10. And what we've done is we've come up with out-of-the-box dashboards, but we've also providing a custom dashboard workspace that I'll get into momentarily. But ultimately, where we're going to start with our compliance sandwich, as Samit likes to put it, and I will echo the statements that compliance is a very large word, and it means a lot of different things to a lot of people. Now, if we go and kind of reverse engineer and break down to the components, where I would like to start off is the lowest level, and that's the actual devices. The devices that are enrolled into Intune. And it's really all about what information do you need to collect and then track on an ongoing basis for those devices. And this is an example of exactly that. So here, I'm visualizing all of the data I'm collecting continuously day in and day out on the different devices. And the format ultimately is with the widgets. It presents a high-level view that then allows the user to drill down as low as they need to get the information that is required. So here, it's all about understanding what my device landscape looks like, right? Who the manufacturers are. Then once I understand that, I can now start to trend and track the activity that these devices are going under. How is it communicating to Intune? When is it syncing Intune? And the way Remo 3 is staging the data, it allows for trend analysis over time. So it's just not a point in time or a last refresh. It's a continuously ever-evolving data set that you can use day in and day out for tracking purposes. So once, I start to understand the communication, the activity syncing, I can even go as far as to start to bring in third-party data sources as it relates to these devices to support the lifecycle of the devices, specifically around Dell and Lenovo, where we can plug directly in to via API into the asset tagging systems if you are partnered up with these manufacturers. And I can start to prepare myself for, what is up to date, what is out to date, what are my warranties looking like. And this capability is not only available just for physical devices. Remo 3 also provides that data visualization and that identification for virtual devices as well. And the example that I'll pivot to here is essentially tracking the same bits of data around a cloud PC environment, understanding what is enterprise, what's being consumed from, a dev box standpoint, and understanding it from that data level to make those best decisions. And as Samit put it, be able to formulate a plan to be as operationally efficient as you can possibly be. So the data, as we kind of understand what our data or our device landscape looks like, we're collecting the data, we now naturally can pivot to the operating systems that are deployed on those devices. And what we're doing is we're doing the exact same thing as we're collecting as much data around the operating system. So one, understanding what versions are out there, what Intune is seeing within the environment, then what is out to date? What is the currency of those? How am I pushing out updates? There's various different ways you can do that within Intune, and each has its own purpose, right? What is that best way that makes you operationally sound? And then starting to track those. And again, the trend analysis over time due to the data staging allows you to get that complete picture. Where here, I can start to understand how my updates are being rolled out and unpack those updates in terms of, is there any negative impact? Is it going to impact any policies that I'm thinking about creating or I already have in force? If I'm missing critical security updates, I have 7 devices that, aren't the latest. How does that impact me? And then again, have the capability to drill down lower and lower into the data to get to that level of comfort. In terms of error analysis and actioning based off of the data, typically we always gravitate to the negative or the failures, but that capability is there to drill down, understand what potential failures are not there. Well, why am I not updating? Well, this will tell me exactly why, what's going on, the timestamp, and then route me back to that low-level device data. And it's not just for Windows updates as well. We have the same visibility capabilities for feature updates and deployment trends through there, where I can understand what my synchronization activity is. I can start to create custom widgets if I am going through an operating system migration, or I'm looking to push out patches quicker. And then ultimately, again, trend analysis over time, where I can see not only my Windows updates, but also my feature updates, and start to understand where I can capacity plan and move from there. Everything is drillable if possible. So end of life support, and ultimately just wrapping my arms around the entire device picture, this time just at that operating system level. And from there, naturally, we can now segue to understanding the applications that are installed on top of the operating systems that are on top of the devices. And what data do we need to collect around the applications? And for those of you that are familiar with the entirety of the Remo 3 solution set, we provide intelligent automation technology that allows us to get to the state where we have hundreds, if not thousands, of high-quality application packages under management into today with an insurance policy that they will deploy and they will function on those endpoints. Now I can pick up that baton and start to manage these day 2, day 3, going back to, well, now what? I have full visibility of what's installed in my environment, what versions those are. And from there, I can now start to explore any types of vulnerabilities or take it from a security angle by now starting to explore any vulnerability exposure as those applications will have within my environment. And how Remo 3 specifically does it is we don't want to be the authoritative source in terms of, identifying or cataloging these vulnerabilities. What we're doing is we are plugging into NIST as an authoritative source, and we're leveraging that very robust data set, again, a third-party data source to complement your Intune data. And we're correlating that vulnerability data against your applications that you have under management within Intune, and start to provide proactive analysis, identification at its core. Is there a level of exposure within my environment? You can see just the out-of-the-box widgets, again, that can be adjusted or or edited to fit for purpose. But again, understanding what I have in my environment from applications, and if any of those applications have potential risk associated to them, and using NIST as that authoritative source. Soon on the roadmap, we'll be releasing the same capability for you to plug into the Defender data sources. But understanding what's out there, drilling down, absorbing more and more information the lower I get into the data set, ultimately identifying back down to that fundamental ingredient of the compliance sandwich would be that device there. And here you can see, again, the data will lead me into understanding not only the applications, the versions, but of course, what devices those are deployed onto. And then having a running total. So ultimately, in this report here, I can see all of the apps in my entire environment that have common vulnerability exposures to them. Again, going back to the intelligent automation components that Remo 3 does provide, ultimately, we want this list to be blank within your Intune tenant. And how we do that is we can tie back to a patch catalog where Remo 3 is automatically updating these from the vendor and then using that intelligent automation to do zero touch with a validation stop against your custom image before it gets into Intune and supersedes this, older version that would have some exposure, some risk associated to it. So as we're building the devices, the operating systems, and the applications, we now have the ingredients of that workspace, and we have the insights to that workspace via your real-world data-driven results. And it's at this point where we can now start to stitch it together and get closer to compliancy. Ultimately, what policies do I have in place? What policies do I need to put in place to make myself compliant? And we can look at this in a variety of different ways. And I'll show a couple here. And one, it's environmental compliance based off of the devices. Again, how those devices are communicating directly with the Intune tenant. You can take it on a security approach. Encryption is always first and foremost. So we're able to then start to identify if there is any risks from policies that, we are enforcing from an encryption standpoint, right? Secure boot, again, any piece of data that you're tracking within Intune can be visualized here. And then roll that up into trending over time, right? It's great to have a point in time snapshot, but here what I can see is my policy, my device policy trend analysis. And this is giving me a couple months view. But not only can I go back in time, I can also go forward in time and start to forecast what my next 6, 8, 12-month plan will be, again, so I can start to capacity plan accordingly and use the trend analysis to determine, okay, if I'm following on this trend, this is what I'm going to need to take into consideration for next quarter, next month's release cycles, etc. And what you can see is it's giving us a glimpse into the crystal ball of the future using all of that data it's mining since it's been collecting it. So the environmental compliance, as well as the auditing perspective of compliance. If there are members of the audience today that are doing framework-based auditing for the SOC 2s of the world, the ISOs of the world, or for our EMEA counterparts, we work very closely with Cyber Essentials. What we're ultimately doing is providing the data visualization, very similar to the application vulnerability where Remo 3 is not the authoritative source. We leverage best of breed. The same approach is done with the policies. So Remo 3 is not going to tell you which policies to create or how to create them. It's going to monitor and track those policies that you have in place with your operational framework and what you're trying to achieve, and then provide that real-time visibility directly through the dashboarding widgets, where you can get from a high-level view trend analysis we showed, what device configurations policies you have in your environment, and as much information as we can possibly service from that. And ultimately, with all of those ingredients stitched together, now we can get super specific on what we're trying to accomplish. And the example I'll show, as I mentioned before, we work with a lot of our customers working towards Cyber Essentials. And what we can leverage the solution for is that single repository to store, track all of our controls, all of our framework, and then start to identify what types of data, what types of dashboards do we need, and then expose this out to the other stakeholders. There's a very common scenario that we come across all the time is that, the information and the power that Intune has is great, and you can spread that across the enterprise. Now, the challenge is that, you know, the person that's requiring a certain set of data, maybe preparing for an audit that we're seeing here, they may not necessarily have the access into the Intune tenant, and certainly might not have the skill sets for the Graph API or even licensing for a third-party reporting tool to make sense of the data. Within Remo 3's reporting, we're leveling that up and exposing that access out without compromising any risk or security posture within that. And ultimately, we want to get the right data into the right hands as quickly as possible. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pause there from the solution overview and turn it back over to you, Smeet.
I appreciate that. Hopefully you guys can see the solution overview slide. We do have a couple of questions that have come through. So we'll address that now. But before we jump into that, you know, we have a couple of options for you, including this QR code, where we want to meet you wherever you are. If you want to get a more in-depth demo, you absolutely can book a meeting with Josh, myself, anyone on the team to talk through some of your challenges and what your insights that you're looking for would look like. Or if you want the more touchless experience and just hook it up to your Intune tenant and start cranking, we do have a free trial available as well. Feel free to scan the QR code, but we're flexible, right? We'll meet you where you are on the journey and give you access to the software in whatever way makes sense for you and works with your team.
Fantastic. And I went ahead and threw those links in the chat, just if it's easier for you to click, that's in there for you as well. We did have a question come in from Gareth. He said, what are the GDPR and data sovereignty obligations for organizations operating under UK jurisdiction?
Great question. I'll
Thank
go
you.
ahead and take that one, Sumit. So the reporting solution that we just saw, that can be deployed. It's so exclusively Microsoft Azure, but it can be deployed in the required geo, in the required availability zone to oblige to those jurisdiction requirements. So specifically with GDPR, ultimately we can deploy where it makes sense based off where you are in the world.
Fantastic. We have one come through in the Q&A here, and it says, what data sources does Clarity connect with out of the box?
A good question. I'll go ahead and
hit it again, Josh. Hit it like you mean it.
Great. So a piece that we didn't get to in today's brief demonstration, but a great follow-up is that that workspace to create custom dashboards. So ultimately, where we're pulling from is a couple different areas. First and foremost, it's all of the Entra and Intune data source, the common data source. And then we've also created different views and summary tables for the Intune summary table data source, common device information. We're plugging into log analytics workspaces and pulling out the WOOF-B information. And those are just the starting places of that, of those data sources that we're connecting to out of the box.
And I think, you know, just Josh showed you the NIST hookups that we have, as well as Defender coming down the pipe as well. So as he mentioned, you know, we are not meant to be the authoritative source. We're good at automating workflows around application management, application validation, application delivery, but ultimately we need the true subject matter experts in each of their domains to provide that data so that we can provide it back to you and create those actions. So you're going to start seeing that data set expand above and beyond what we already have today, but that's all based off of your feedback and any gaps that we're seeing in the market in general. But you'll see that we've started with NIST, we're working with Cyber Essentials, we'll do the same with some of the other governance bodies around compliance and in the future, but the data sources are ultimately going to be the leaders in their respective fields. Let's put it that way.
Fantastic. And I think this is great to close this out today. Can you tell us who benefits most from Clarity?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because you know, the demo you just saw was the Remo 3 environment. And Remo 3 is not your typical enterprise. We're not 5,000, 7,000 employees. Where traditional SCCM was really meant for people that had the infrastructures and the skill sets to support that level of granular control and flexibility. Intune is much more friendly for native cloud adoption. Organizations like Remo3 that don't necessarily have their debt. We don't have a massive amount of technical debt, old homegrown applications, we're SaaS first. So when you start thinking about MSPs and you start thinking about the SMB market, there still is a need for visibility and some level of automation. It might not be the full kit and caboodle, but they're still going to be able to get material value out of having an audit trail, having the ability to optimize their Intune processes. So whereas, you know, the broader platform might be more geared towards the enterprise, this reporting capability and actionable insights is really for anyone that is looking to adopt Intune, whether it's a 10-person organization that's embraced cloud native, or whether it's a 150,000 seat organization that has a massive amount of debt that needs to move from config manager to Intune. This visibility is relevant for everybody.
Awesome. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us today and everybody else for attending. We hope it was meaningful, impactful for you and your businesses. So feel free to join us on our future webinars. And if you've got any questions that you thought about even after the webinar, you can connect us with us here. We've got the email for Sim and Joss. I'll go ahead and throw those in the chat as well. But we do look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you all for the time. I know it's hard to get out of the office for even 30 minutes, so it is much appreciated.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.